Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a very special day here at Purdue. My name is Abhi Deshmukh. I am the James J. Solberg Head of School of Industrial Engineering, and it is my distinct pleasure and honor to welcome all of you. Our distinguished speaker for today, NASA Administrator Charles Bolden, Provost, Associate Provost, Vice President for Research, all the deans of the university, the faculty who are here, and especially all our students who are here today for this truly momentous occasion for the entire university. There are times in our human history when we have noticed that the tools, the way we do things are just not enough. They are not sufficient for us to solve the big problems, the vexing challenges that we have at hand. And Thomas Kuhn, the famous philosopher of science, called it the paradigm shift. And these paradigm shifts happen when we reach a point where the doing things as usual really is not sufficient. Interestingly, Stephen Jay Gould, who is an evolutionary biologist, saw the same sort of behavior in biological evolution, and he called it punctuated equilibria, where the evolution happens sort of on a normal trajectory, but then there are these jumps that happen. I believe we are at a point in our understanding of how do we deal with large, big, hairy, audacious societal problems now that needs a paradigm shift. And that's exactly why you're all here. You're going to listen to an announcement that Provost Datta is going to make about Purdue's leadership in making that paradigm shift happen. Before I invite Provost Datta to make the announcement, I'd like to thank the village that made this happen. This just doesn't happen. This is an activity that takes truly the entire campus to foster it and to bring it to a point where we are ready to do something. First of all, I'd like to thank the cross-campus systems faculty that truly lit the fire of this particular collaboration, this particular way of thinking. Then I'd like to thank the Purdue leadership, Provost, all the deans, especially Leah Jameson, who has been our patron saint for the longest time on this. It's the Pope is here. So. But truly, the Purdue administrators who fanned the flames by providing critical support. And most importantly, all the amazing students, and you'll get to meet some of the students here after the announcement today, that are truly the fuel that keeps this going. But not just keeps it going, is going to make this bigger as we move along. So now it's my distinct privilege and pleasure to introduce Provost Deba Datta, who is Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs and Diversity, to come and make the announcement.
Thank you, Abhi, and welcome everyone. It is a great day for Purdue today, as you all heard. So just to give some context, we do live in a world of dynamic and complex systems, some spawned by nature, some built by humans, but all of them interrelated in some way or another. And complex systems are a part of every living organism, every natural phenomena, and every built mechanism for us engineers. These range from large-scale systems such as space explorations, the power grid, social networks, smart cities, to small-scale systems such as amoeba, personalized medicine, 3D nanostructures, and so on and so forth. We are all system builders in some way or another. We are all, or many of us are, system integrators, but we are not yet skilled at understanding holistically how these systems behave and how to anticipate the full range of impact when these systems are disrupted. So our ability to create complex systems has far exceeded the capability until this day to understand and manage them. So you heard Abhi say this, and I will say it again. Purdue is a place where we think big, and therefore today we are announcing, due to the hard work of everyone that Abhi mentioned, faculty, staff, students, and administrators, it is my pleasure to announce the establishment of the Purdue Systems Collaboratory, PSC, to tackle these challenges and to help move the world forward. It is our hope that the PSC will overcome key barriers facing the world today. It'll focus on the convergence of knowledge to tackle problems spanning multiple disciplines and domain. It will focus on the human dimension to fully understand the critical elements of any solution to these complex problems. The human element of these complex problems is very, very important. As most of us know, whether you're in engineering or in social science or in life science, it is all about the humans who are at the center of it. And you'll hear more from our keynote speaker this morning. And most importantly, I think, through this effort, we will be educating a new generation of thinkers who will have the capability to work in multiple disciplines and understand multiple perspectives that they can then bring to bear on technical problems. Our goal at Purdue is to provide best preparation for students across all disciplines: sciences, engineering, humanities, social sciences, arts, and the professional schools. But we want to do this with a systems perspective so that our alumni can be leaders in their chosen fields. It is the place, I would add, Purdue, the place to take on this ambitious endeavor. We have a portfolio of strong, very strong disciplines. All of you know about that. And we have a long history of interdisciplinary work that defines Purdue in research education. We also have a unique network of global collaborators. If, or maybe I should say when, we are successful in this endeavor, the transformative research will generate significant societal benefits while reducing unintended consequences. This will lead, it is my hope, to the creation of new infrastructures, public policies, efficient and resilient complex engineers products, while addressing the needs and capabilities demanded by today's corporations and society at large. It will create a whole new generation of citizenry that is adept at building next generation systems that benefit the society. Ladies and gentlemen, it is therefore my great honor and a distinct pleasure to introduce this afternoon our keynote speaker, who has a wealth of knowledge and experience in complex systems. Major General Charles Frank Bolden, Jr., U.S. Marine Corps retired, has served as the administrator of NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, since 17th of July 2009. He was nominated by President Barack Obama and confirmed by the U.S. Senate as the 12th administrator of NASA. Mr. Bolden leads the nationwide NASA team to advance missions and goals of the U.S. space program, including not only scientific and technical aspects, but also complex issues surrounding policy, economics, and impact on humankind. He has guided the agency through tremendous change and achievement, including transitioning the 30-year Space Shuttle program, expanding the International Space Station, landing the Curiosity rover on Mars, launching a spacecraft to Jupiter, developing a rocket to carry astronauts into deep space, establishing a Space Technology Mission Directorate for Tomorrow's Technology, as well as supporting commercial space transportation. A native of South Carolina, Mr. Bolden attended U.S. Naval Academy, where he earned a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical science and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. For one who admitted at lunch never wanted to fly, flying more than 100 combat missions as a naval aviator since 1970. He then earned a Master of Science degree in Systems Management from the University of Southern California and was selected an astronaut candidate in 1980. His 34-year career in Marine Corps included 14 years as a member of NASA's astronaut office. He traveled on the space shuttle 4 times between '86 and 1994, commanding 2 missions and piloting 2 others. After his final shuttle flight in 1994, he returned to active duty with the Marine Corps, where he led midshipmen in the Naval Academy, commanded forces in the Pacific and in Kuwait, and was promoted to his final rank of Major General in July 1998. Mr. Bolden retired from the Marine Corps in 2003, and his numerous military decorations include the Defense Superior Service Medal and the Distinguished Flying Cross. He was inducted into the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame in May 2006. Through his life and career experiences, Mr. Bolden has tremendous depth and breadth and worked with complex systems. He understands how the convergence of knowledge is critical in problem solving. He leads an organization that is technical, but also lives in the larger context of humankind. NASA is involved in exploring and analyzing not only everything that we do with space exploration, but also how humans live and operate and exist in that exploration, and not only in the US, all over the world. We are delighted to have him with us today to help launch the Purdue Systems Collaboratory. So would you please join me in welcoming Mr. Charles Bolden.
Well, thank you very much, Provost Dutta, and thanks to all of you for allowing me to come and join you today. It's a special treat for me to come back to Purdue after quite some time, having been away. You know, I am one who was brought up in NASA, and I actually had an opportunity to interact with one of your foremost alums, that being Neil Armstrong, the late Neil Armstrong. I know a lot about Gus Grissom, and we were just in the Grissom Hall. And I will mention in my estimation, one of your foremost alums, and he is still alive and kicking and helping us to run the International Space Station and NASA's efforts at international space exploration. And that's Bill Gerstenmaier, who I have a special affinity for Bill because when I first came to the astronaut office shortly after I got there and began training for a flight, Bill Gerstenmaier was one of my flight controllers, and he was a propulsion systems flight controller, so he taught me all about flight control systems, propulsion systems on the space shuttle, and then went on to lead the International Space Station program office, and now he's running human exploration programs for NASA at NASA headquarters in Washington. For me, it's great to be here among a lot of friends, and including my good friend, Professor Dan Dunbacher. Dan told me not to call him doctor, but I call him Dr. Dunbacher anyway. I had the honor and the pleasure of calling Dan a NASA colleague for several years before he came in sometime about a year or two ago and broke the news to me that he was going to drop us like a hot potato to go back to his alma mater, Purdue University. However, as crushed as I was, I told him that I could not think of any better place to go or any better person to go back there, because as I had an opportunity to share with some of the deans and faculty leaders at lunch, you make tomorrow's leaders here, and that's really, really, really important. And I can't think of anyone better than Dan Dunbacher to be here contributing to that effort. You know, if you all were ever in a market for a new name, not that you ever would be, but you could almost call this the University of NASA. And I say that only half jokingly, but I say it because of two words, and those two words are Neil Armstrong. Neil Armstrong loved this institution. He was so proud of it, talked about it until his death, and always thought about coming back here. And I think if he had an opportunity, he is looking down on us. But I think today he's beaming with pride because we have this place filled and we're talking about something that is so dear to him, which is space exploration and the international collaborative that is that line of work. Of course, the NASA-Purdue connections actually go well beyond the first human to set foot on the moon. As I'm sure most of you know, President Daniels' predecessor, Franz Cordova, was herself a former NASA chief scientist. What's more, 22 NASA astronauts have been Purdue Boilermakers, 22. And I say this very proudly. That's second only to my own alma mater, the United States Naval Academy, but we cheat. And it's because there was no Air Force Academy for a long time. And for many, many years, all of the Air Force officers who went to flight school and subsequently became astronauts were graduates of the United States Naval Academy. So we have probably an equal number of Air Force astronauts and Navy/Marine Corps astronauts throughout our history. But I don't think that's anything for Purdue to worry about. 22 that's no slouch. So this place, these halls, has contributed a tremendous amount to the space program and more broadly to American innovation, ingenuity, and discovery. Therefore, if you had told me that there was a university that was doing something so bold and forward-looking as the Systems Collaboratory, I would likely have asked, is it Purdue? It just goes without saying that you would do something like that here. You would be so bold as to do that. The great American philosopher William James once wrote, and I quote, "Our lives are like islands in the sea or trees in the forest. The maple and the pine may whisper to each other with their leaves, but the trees also commingle their roots in the darkness underground, and the islands also hang together through the ocean's bottom," unquote. That has taken on a special meaning to me since I've had the privilege of viewing this earth from the vantage point that not very many people have. And I've come to talk about this planet, this incredible planet on which we live. It is a water planet. You know, we were taught in school that, you know, Earth is what, 3/4, 4/5 water. It's a lot of water, trust me. And the one thing that becomes very obvious almost immediately when you look down on the planet is we don't have multiple oceans. We have a lot of names for sections of that body of water, but we live in one ocean. And every once in a while you'll see a body of land stick up in that ocean, and we call the big ones continents, and the little ones that we can see islands, and then there's some others that you only see for a few minutes or a few hours a day because they just get, you know, as the tides come and go, they just disappear. So I can relate to what William James once wrote. The old way of looking things, both in academia and at big government agencies like NASA, was to focus on the surface, where the trees and the islands appear to be separate, isolated entities. Human exploration is over there, human capital is over there, engineering is over there, English literature is over there. That was the old way of looking at things. What's so brilliant and revolutionary about what you're doing here at Purdue is that you're no longer looking at these things as islands or trees that are inherently separated. Instead, you're looking to bring those roots that William James wrote about out from under the ground and into the daylight, where we can study them, embrace them, and in fact, look for ways to both strengthen and learn from them. That's what we're trying to do also at NASA. It's the same spirit that's inspiring a lot of folks throughout our country to take a fresh look at what for many years we've known as STEAM education: science, technology, engineering, and math. Today, however, there's a movement afoot to change STEAM or STEM to STEAM, with an A in there for the arts. I have a relatively new deputy now, Dr. Dava Newman from MIT, who was a professor of aero and astro at MIT. And Dava is a fan of not only STEAM, but she refers to it as STEAMed, because she says it's not just science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, but it's design. It's helping to put new systems together. So STEAM, STEAMed, you take it whichever way you want it. It's more than just STEM. There's a connection between training our brain to arrange notes on a sheet of music or to paint a picture and training it to solve a complex math equation, and perhaps build a rocket or develop a new landing system. Vincent van Gogh talked about great things being the product of a bunch of different small things that are brought together. If you think about every little brushstroke that went into one of his paintings, all that attention to detail, you can see what he was talking about. I can tell you that at NASA, we'd be dead in the water if we weren't willing to be dynamic and interdisciplinary in how we approach our mission of reaching new heights for the benefit of humankind. I thought we could do this simple exercise, so I'm going to ask all of you to bear with me here, okay? Close your eyes for just a moment. Don't worry. We're not going to pick your pockets or anything, but just close your eyes for a moment. The year is sometime in the 2030s. You and your families or friends or both are gathered around your video device of choice. Who knows, maybe in the 2030s it's a hologram. Be creative. It's your own daydream. I'm not going to tell you how you have to see it. Imagine you're all gathered around because there's something very special that's happening, and you want to see it live. You want to be around the people who matter most because it's one of those seminal moments in history you don't want to experience alone. You want to share it. So you're all gathered around to watch an image that's being beamed to Earth from a rover, or even perhaps a robot. The image is of the surface of Mars. From the Martian skies descends a landing vehicle. On the side of it, a big American flag. There's also a blue meatball that says NASA. The vehicle lands, and when the doors open up, out steps not a robot or a rover, but an actual human being, an American astronaut. Then she, or he, are followed by fellow astronauts of other nations. It's okay to open your eyes now. We're now today closer than ever before in human history to making this vision a reality. I can tell you that NASA is on a journey to Mars, and there is a new consensus emerging around our plan and timetable for getting our astronauts to the red planet in the 2030s. It's very possible that the person who will take those first steps on Martian soil is right here at Purdue University today. Or perhaps she or he is in a class or a lab out in an elementary school in West Lafayette. Or maybe they're in high school getting started on that Purdue application. Whew. Remember that? But that's really only part of the story. And here is why Purdue's multidisciplinary, systems-oriented approach is so relevant and so important. In order to get those astronauts to Mars, it's going to take astronauts, astronomers, engineers, and scientists, yes. But let's think for a moment who else it's going to take. One group of unsung heroes are the human capital professionals who make sure that the best and brightest not only want to come to NASA to work on things like rockets and robots, but that they want to stay at NASA once they get there. I always say that my top priority as the NASA administrator is our people. And I'm very proud to be able to tell you that for 3 years in a row now, we've been named the #1 best place to work in the federal government. The medical professionals that keep our employees healthy also have an important role to play. I just came back from Houston, Texas this past Monday where I did my annual physical to make sure that I'm still kicking, because when I get to be 77 and equal the age that John Glenn was when he flew his last space mission, he told me he'll give me permission to go fly again. So I've got to stay healthy until I'm 77. And you can't do anything without funding, without money. At NASA, we not only have top-notch scientists, we have an incredible budget team. Just ask your president, Mitch Daniels. When he headed up the Office of Management and Budget, I think we were formidable. I wouldn't call us opponents, but we were formidable folk for him to handle, because we always had this insatiable, still do, insatiable appetite for money. We also have people who work around the clock on legislative issues. We also rely on teams to work in partnership with industry to advance the latest technologies. SpaceX, Boeing, Orbital ATK, Lockheed Martin, you name it. Every single one of those incredible companies that represent the United States on a global scale, they need somebody who's a liaison from NASA helping them to make sure that they're fulfilling the needs that we have and that we're working collaboratively with them. And perhaps most importantly, and I didn't have a full appreciation for this until I became the NASA administrator, we rely on communicators who help articulate to the public about where we're going and how we plan to get there. And trust me, if you don't have a good communications team, you're going nowhere. You're going nowhere. We were having a conversation earlier today. Any veterans in here? Military veterans? I know LaShonda's down there, who's still in the Coast Guard. I'm not surprised, by the way. You know, about 1% of the American public, the whole population of the nation, serves in the U.S. military. 1%. So that means the other 99% of us, kind of get a free ride while that 1% goes off to fight the nation's wars and does everything else. It's not exactly the same. I think it's a little bit better than that when you talk about people who are enthused about space flight and exploration. But it is a very small percentage of the American public who shares what most of you in this room probably share and get excited about, and that's exploration and science and discovery and going to other worlds. So when there's 90-some-odd% of the American populace that doesn't have a clue what we're doing, nor care in some cases, if you don't have a good communications team, you're going nowhere. So no astronaut, no engineer, no administrator, no budgeteer, no anybody is going to help you if you don't have a good communications team, somebody who can write for you and tell your story, someone who can stand in front of the American public and tell your story. So we want to get to Mars, but it's going to take a team of all those different people that I just mentioned. Everyone has a role to play. The security professionals who make sure our employees are safe, the historians who can give us a perspective on where we've been and where we hope to go, the education teams who are working to inspire a new generation to bring us into the future. Then there are the many people outside the organization who might not immediately come to mind, but who are also so important. The fifth grade teacher who captures her or his students' imagination. The filmmakers who make a movie like The Martian that inspire a new generation of students to want to be scientists. The corporate recruiter for one of the companies working to return launches of American astronauts to American soil. The journalist who writes the profile that inspires a young girl or boy to want to study science. The great Norah Jones, if you're like I am and you're a music lover, the great Norah Jones has said that making music is part social, part interaction, part collaboration. So too is putting human beings on Mars. I want to leave you today with a quote from the great Steven Spielberg. He said, "When I was a kid, there was no collaboration. It's you with a camera bossing your friends around. But as an adult, filmmaking is all about appreciating the talents of the people you surround yourself with and knowing you could never have made any of these films by yourself." That's the way it is for us today in NASA. Without our international partners, without our industry partners, without our entrepreneurial partners, without our partners in academia, we're going nowhere. I'm truly excited, impressed, and awed, to be quite honest, with the work that you're doing here at Purdue to prepare students across a range of disciplines to work together, to seek out and respect different perspectives, and ultimately to take us to the furthest reaches of space, progress, and imagination. So, congratulations, Purdue University. Boiler up!
Thank you, Administrator Bolden, for your truly inspiring remarks. You couldn't have found a better place to give the steam analogy. We are Boilermakers. So I'd like to invite Provost Datta to come up here. We have a few minutes for questions from the audience, and would love to hear your thoughts, comments for any one of us. There are Walter and Caitlin are out there with microphones, so if you can please raise your hands and they'll come over with the microphone. So the floor is open.
Not all at once.
Well, thank you, General Bolden. I was wondering if you had any particular complex systems, whether they be technological or human organizational, that you think Purdue is well suited to help you in the near term with the Collaboratory?
I think it goes without saying that any of our complex technical systems, Purdue is perfectly suited because of the history and reputation you have for producing incredible engineers. But as a result of the Collaboratory that you're announcing today, I think you're going to be better suited than any other university in the country, if not the world, to help us when we talk about getting to Mars. An example I gave to the deans earlier was how different it's going to be when we launch the first human crew to Mars. We go to space today and we live and work on the International Space Station for 6 months at a time. Scott Kelly and Mikhail Kornienko, Misha, they're up there for a year. But every day that they look out the window, Earth is right there. Granted, 250 miles away, but Earth is right there and it fills the window and they can talk to their families and everything. When we launched the first crew to Mars, in the first month or two, when they get into the window and they look back at the planet, it's going to start to become more and more like the other stars out there, if you will. It's going to become this twinkling light. We don't know right now. We have no clue how that crew is going to react to the fact that their planet has just disappeared. That their 6-month-old or 6-year-old kid is back. I get emotional when I talk about this, that there are kids back there on this place that they can't find, in the vastness of space. And that they pick up a radio and they make a call, and it's far enough away now that it's minutes, before his or her voice gets to their child on the ground, and then it's minutes before it gets back. That's psychological, and I'm not sure that, we're working on it because we're already introducing delays in our communication systems on the International Space Station. But that's, I remember my first flight on the space shuttle. I was incredibly prepared technically. In fact, being of African descent, I had spent a lot of time studying the geography of Africa because I wanted to be able to see all the countries and guess where my ancestors had come from. I knew that I had a great some grandmother who had been sold at auction on the slave block in Charleston, South Carolina at the age of 16, and she had come from somewhere in West Africa. So I really wanted to see that from space. And we launched out of the Kennedy Space Center. And about 10 minutes later, we're crossing over the British Isles, and I looked up and I saw this big island. And it all of a sudden hit me that big island was not an island. That was the continent of Africa. And what struck me was it didn't have any lines. I couldn't tell one country from the other because it was all just one big, beautiful continent. And I mean, tears just streamed down my face because I realized right then that planet that I was now seeing from a totally different perspective was the way that, you know, God or whoever put it there intended it to be. And that there was something that we just were doing really wrong because it really wasn't down on the planet, you know, the way that it looked from the vantage point of space. So I think the psychological challenges that crews are going to face are those, among others, are things that we haven't even begun to deal with, and we don't have a lot of time to prepare for that.
Thank you for coming, General. My name is Paul Brown. I'm in the College of Agriculture, and there's a number of us here who think there's some significant interactions that could develop between the College of Agriculture and Engineering, aerospace, et cetera. NASA was heavily involved in advanced life support systems some years ago, but have gotten away from that recently. Do you have any thoughts on coming back and revisiting the advanced life support systems needed for Mars missions?
Where's Dan? We're busily working on it. So if we're not here, I got to get Professor Dunbacher to find out why we're not here, because we have a whole matrix of challenges, of risks that we've got to buy down before somebody in my place can say, okay, you know, give a thumbs up to saying, let's go ahead and launch. And one of the key challenges is advanced life support systems. You can't have a toilet that breaks every few months because there are no supplies coming up. You know, we're talking about 3 years probably when you embark on a mission to Mars. 8 months to get there today with the current propulsion systems, a year on the planet or around the planet, waiting for the planets to realign again, and then 8 months to come back. So we are working on that. But with you being from the Department of Agriculture, we have established great partnerships with the Department of Agriculture itself. Some of you may know that the crew, you know, we ate our first homegrown lettuce last month, and we are working with the Department of Agriculture. Undersecretary Hardin was just beside herself, Agriculture Undersecretary Hardin, because she, and I don't know whether she's serious or not, but she says they want to learn how to feed the planet from space, you know, because we know we can figure out ways to do that. So yes, we have great need to continue to collaborate with you on advanced life support systems, on agricultural systems, because we've got to figure out how we feed a crew, because there are no supply ships coming with food the way we do now on the International Space Station. You've got to either take it with you, which is next to impossible, or you've got to grow it and make it on the way. So we're looking at microbes, you know, microbes to make building material, microbes to make food, all other kinds of things.
Hi, my name is Max. I'm a student in the Aerospace or Aeronautics and Astronautics Department. This is for any of the three of you. NASA has done a truly incredible job in promoting the viability of the systems engineering approach, of interdisciplinary engineering in solving real-world problems. Nevertheless, there is still a bit of a stigma associated with systems engineering, especially from the individual departments, about the utility of this approach. And I was wondering, as systems engineers, how can we best work to undo that stigma associated with the systems engineering approach and prove that it really is as viable an approach as any of the subdisciplines?
So just to clarify, what we're talking about today is really beyond systems engineering. What we're talking about truly is systems perspective that transcends engineering. This is bringing all the disciplines together to solve a problem. Political science typically doesn't fit in a systems engineering flowchart when you look at it. So that's the first caveat. But the second, to answer your question, systems engineering is a process that is used to tackle problems, especially complex problems. And at NASA, you have a lot of these complex problems. Now, there is a connection between solving the problem and the actual technology that goes into solution of the problem. So making the case clear that the process itself is as important as the technology is, I think, the key mindset change that has to happen, and that is happening in large organizations. So does that?
And the only thing I will add here is that The corporations and the federal agencies that hire our graduates, they have a big role to play. So when they use the term systems engineering, we want to hire systems engineers. That makes a difference in terms of having the value of the discipline and the degree recognized. But it does take time, so I think it will happen. It is something that the corporations and NASA clearly recognize, so it's just a matter of time.
So Administrator Bolden, my name is Stephen Whitna. I'm in the aeronautics department here. But my question is really talking about, right now we have a plan to go to Mars. And, we've been pretty consistent about that over the last several years here. But as we go through political transitions, as we go through the next steps and we try and, because it's a very long-term plan, how do those of us here, really try and help keep us on that path and keep us, really from, switching paths and, causing a lot of chaos like already happened several years ago?
Yeah. And that is probably the biggest challenge of mounting any initiative that is a long-term initiative like sending humans to Mars. The reason we have always been 30, 40 years from going to Mars is because I think we didn't tell ourselves that we had to put a plan in place that had three principles. One is it had to be reasonable, had to be real. It has to be sustainable, which means it's got to last over multiple administrations and multiple Congresses, and it's got to be affordable. And the affordable part is, that's probably the most difficult part. I know Professor Dunbacher back there will tell you that you can either put a plan together based on your dream, or you can put a plan together based on what you anticipate is going to be the level of funding. One of the difficulties we have is we almost never get funding that fits anybody's development curve. You would not, nothing that you're learning here at Purdue teaches you to take on a development program with a flat line budget. Just doesn't happen that way. So people like Bill Gerstenmaier have to become very ingenious and figure out how you fit a development curve under a straight line. And we managed to do that. And when I talked about the communicators, the importance of communication, what we have now, I guess, gotten the courage to do is go in and tell Congress and the administration that, look, this is something we're going to do. The nation really should do this. The only question is, when do we get to the destination? We know where the destination is. We've reached consensus with our international partners. We've reached consensus with Congress, with the administration and everybody. We will give you an amount of money that we think will get us there in the 2030s. And so far, we're getting broad acceptance of the estimates that we're giving them and the timeline and everything. But if a change comes, the plan that we've put in place now, we think is resilient enough, and it has enough options that the only thing that changes is the delivery date, but you don't change the system itself. Another thing that you'll see that we're doing is we're not making early commitments on architecture. One of the biggest complaints that we get from everybody, trust me, particularly the corporations that are going to build the hardware. Everybody wants to know, okay, what's your final architecture? We said, we're talking about 2030. And we don't know what the technology will have developed by that time for your landing vehicle. We don't know whether one of you sitting in this audience may have made some incredible breakthrough in in-space propulsion. We may be flying a nuclear propulsion system instead of what we use today, chemical propulsion. Now, instead of taking 8 months to get to Mars, you're talking about 4 months or less. That's a significant difference. It's a significant impact on the ability of the crew, to go without worrying about radiation effects and all those other kinds of things. Could change the entire way that we think about it. So what we have in place today is a program that's broad enough with, it looks like a spider web when you look at options for areas you can go. Where do you go first? Do you go to Phobos, Deimos, to the surface of Mars, or do you go to Mars orbit? That is not That's not something we're ready to decide just yet. And we don't think we need to decide it until we've actually spent a little bit of our 10 years that we're going to spend in cislunar space. We're going to spend the 20s back in the lunar system. We're going to go, and everything that's being done now in Earth orbit on the International Space Station will shift in the 20s to cislunar space. So we'll be, NASA and our international partners will be operating in the lunar environment, while some of you who go into commercial space will be controlling and operating low Earth orbit, which is the stepping stone for an exploration program. Dan Dunbacher will tell you, if we don't have a sustained commercial presence in low Earth orbit, then we have no exploration program. So that's tremendously different from where we were when people talked about going to the moon. Back then it was just, we got to get there before the Soviets. You know, that was it. We did that, and we came back. But we're not doing that right now. We're talking, as the President said in his State of the Union address, we are now at the point where humanity needs to go farther into the solar system, and we need to go with an intent to stay, you know, to operate out there for long periods of time.
Just to make clear that at NASA you commented about flatline development curve. At Purdue the curve bends down.
Well, we had a saying the last few years that flat is the new up. That's a fact, but that's not a good joke. But yeah.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. My question is more direct towards the political side that you've had to deal with. How do you deal with having to deal with both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party? Because NASA is always looking towards long-term opportunities. However, when we're dealing with the political spectrum, that stuff only lasts 4 years. So you got to be able to play both sides of the fence. Yeah. And I was wondering how also is something that we can do for people that aren't that 1%, as you said, that are the space nuts. How can we also give us some advice on recruiting some of those people to come join the dark side, I guess.
The biggest thing that I have learned in my 6 years as the NASA administrator so far is that you have to be constantly engaged with both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. You know, I'm a part of the administration, so it's really easy for me to blame it on Congress. That doesn't help anything. It's both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue that are the source of the problem. Both ends of the avenue are inflexible, and there is a certain term that is absolutely necessary for success of anything, and it's a term called compromise. If you've got both ends of of Pennsylvania Avenue unwilling to compromise, you're really struggling. What has really helped us, I think my world turned around when I got a guy named David Weaver as my the head of communications, and a guy named Mike French, who is currently my chief of staff, who had come from being the deputy cabinet secretary, in the first term of the Obama administration. So I then had a masterful communicator who, understood political communications, if you will, dealing with both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, and a young man who really knew how the system operated in terms of the politics. We spend a lot of time trying to coax and cajole members of Congress, but also members of the administration, whether it's OMB or the Office of Science and Technology Policy, because OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, they have a big job to do. Keep the president from breaking the bank. Your president will tell you that. I mean, if you ask Mitch Daniels, he'll tell you. That is the hardest thing for the OMB director to do. Keep the president from breaking the bank, because every president promises the world. And, I'm going to spend money here and I'm going to spend money there, and it's just not there. And so if we can spend as little as possible, everybody's happy. So we have to be able to work with our end of Pennsylvania Avenue to present a plan that was, what's your name? Stephen, that Stephen referred to, where the plan closes, where you can see that, at whatever date and time it is that you said, that you're going to get where it is that you wanted to go. And I think we're being slowly, methodically successful in convincing both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue that, that what we're doing is the right thing to do for the nation, and that it's expected of us, of our international partners. That's the other thing that I found. You've got to shore up your international partner support, because frequently they're much more influential than I can ever be with both the Congress and the administration. You know, when the president or the prime minister of England comes over and talks to the president in their one-on-one about the value of the International Space Station, you know, to England or to France or Germany or whatever, that goes a lot farther than the NASA administrator who doesn't see the president every day, you know, going in and trying to convince him of something. So building strong coalitions internationally, strong partnership with industry, and you know, working the communications angle. And I think that's exactly what the Collaboratory is talking about. It is a new paradigm. It's a new way of doing business. You can be the best engineer in the world, but if you don't have a sense of what else is going on around you, what else is going on in the world, it's going to be really, really hard to get what it is that you have in mind done. Hopefully that, you asked me what time it was and I built a watch, but hopefully that's okay.
We have time for one more question.
Thank you so much for being here. From your perspective, what's the message? You talked a lot about communication and how critical that is to kind of break through the clutter. And as a girl growing up, I always wanted to be an astronaut after seeing that first man walk on the moon. So what's the message from your dearth and wealth of experience that does break through the clutter, that inspires people to be in this 1%?
Yeah. You use a term that I learned. I was told by the young man who was the president of NSBE. Some of you who know what NSBE is. It's the National Society of Black Engineers. And my very first year as the NASA administrator, because I'm passionate about education. You know, my parents were educators. That's all they did their entire lives. They went to heaven educating people. So one of the first things I did was hold an education summit and brought in some university presidents, the director of the Boston Museum of Natural History, and in my introductory remarks, I kept talking about how President Obama had told me he wanted us to inspire kids to do this and inspire. And finally, this young man raised his hand. He said, you know, if you say that one more time, I'm going to puke. And I said, if I say what? He said, inspire. He said, we can't inspire anybody until we inform them. If they don't know it exists, you know, they can't be inspired to go do that. So in your case, in my case, where we come from, we've got to get into the community and let kids know that these things exist. We've got to let them know that, yeah, they can build robots just like anybody else. You know, they can be a part of FIRST Robotics. They can be a part of FIRST Legos. You here on this campus have an exceptional opportunity to get out in the community, and don't say you don't have time. We have time to do anything we want to do, and there is no better way to spend your time than reaching back and grabbing a child, and bringing them along. So we've got to expose them to the things that can be done. The Martian, you hear me talk about the Martian all the time. It is incredible what the Martian has already done, but what I think it's going to do in terms of getting young people interested again, as we were during the Apollo era, you know, in exploring. Because it's about a real human being who has done this incredibly challenging thing and almost didn't survive, but does. So it's a whole bunch of stories, if you will. Huh? Yeah. No, it's a good movie. It's a great movie. I haven't seen it, by the way. So did I spoil it? Really? Oh, I did read the book. That's true. Okay. I don't know whether that answered the question or not. I've got a young lady with me right now, LaShonda Holmes, out here, who is, she's a lieutenant in the Coast Guard, White House fellow. I'm not sure whether she ever thought she'd be a White House fellow when she was going to Spelman College and decided, you know, somewhere along the line that she really liked the Coast Guard recruiter over there and decided to go talk to him and find out what it is. And today she flies, you know, intercept helicopters in the Coast Guard. How many black women do you think you're going to see flying helicopters in the Coast Guard or any other service? that's exposure. Now, you know, she's burdened because she's got to get back into the community, which she does, and lets young people see that it can be done. And, you know, you young women in here who are in engineering, I think I don't need to tell you, you get through the first year and you kind of go, whew, but then the question you ask yourself is it worth it? You know, that was just year one. Do I really want to go through this crap for another 3 years or whatever it is? And you will have to decide whether you want to do that. And it is so important for you to have a professor who looks like you or who can say, you know, it really is worth it. It is hard, but life's hard, and it's not fair. And I have 3 granddaughters, and a wonderful daughter. I have a son and daughter. My son's a Marine. My daughter's a medical doctor. But I have taught them all their lives, and I tell my granddaughters all the time, don't waste your time trying to explain to somebody why you're in the room. You know, if you're having to waste time explaining to somebody why you as a woman are there, or you as a person of color are there, you're wasting your time. You are not going to change their mind. Take that time and effort and do what you know how to do and be the best at your job, and then they will understand why you're there. And if they don't, then you can fire them, you know, when you become the boss. So that's all.
Well, thank you, Administrator Bolden and Provost Datta, for a very, very enlightening conversation. So this concludes, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. So this concludes our ceremony for this part of the ceremony. We would like to invite you to join us upstairs for a reception where you can talk more with Administrator Bolden or just converse with your fellow systems folks. But the Purdue Systems Collaboratory is officially launched. So one more round of applause. And please stay tuned for announcements from the Collaboratory. We are planning on a host of activities coming up, including some brown bag lunches, seminars, and also workshops that brings the community together. So you should be hearing from us very shortly. So I invite all of you to the reception upstairs. Thank you.